Hi everybody, this is Chris Hurt, and today I'm going to walk you through the developer setup for LanguageForge. I'm excited to demo the Docker developer environment and also get into the code, both the PHP code and the AngularJS front-end code, and talk about how those two pieces relate, and then see if we can't actually make a change and see it update and how a developer would work through that. This will be a series of videos. The first one is just an overview of the code as it currently exists, and future videos hoping to focus on one on testing, one on debugging tests and debugging the actual application, running it locally, those sorts of things. So here we go. Okay, here I am at my desktop. I'm going to open up a command prompt. And the assumption is you've already cloned the web LanguageForge repo. So I'm just going to go right into the Docker folder, and then I'll do a make build. Make build is going to build the application so that I can run it locally on my developer machine. Okay, now since it's finished building, I'm just going to run make. And then I can open a web browser and browse to localhost. Okay, yeah, that's actually, this is actually already logged in here. I was thinking that you get to this point to like the LanguageForge homepage. Looks like something like this, and if you get to here, you know that at least your Docker environment is set up and running, and clicking on login, this actually brings you to the LanguageForge application, so that it's using the back end as well. When you start off from a brand new clone and building the Docker images and running them, you're not going to have any user set up locally for development. So I recommend running the db reset task. So you can do that simply. I'm going to go ahead and do a make clean to bring down the running Docker environment. You'll see after this is done that refreshing localhost will actually not work anymore. So we can't do it. Okay, it's finished taking the web services down. I'm going to do a make db reset. This is just a simple service put together. The sole purpose is to run some PHP script that populates some on the database with the admin user password. So you can see that here, creating local user admin password. And now I'll go ahead and make to bring the website up again. And then I'll refresh my page. I see that LanguageForge is up and running on localhost, so I can log in as admin and password. And there's some random error exception, which I'm not going to deal with right now. Okay, so that's the site working locally. Let's go ahead and run the tests just so we can demonstrate that our development environment is set up correctly. So I'll just close the web browser for now, and I'll do another make clean to shut down the running containers. You can also just do a Docker compose down if you don't want to do a make clean. Make clean goes an extra step and removes those containers, freeing up some disk space. Okay, so the next one I'm going to do is I'm going to make the PHP tests. We're going to run the PHP tests. It takes less than 2 minutes to run these things. These are all like back-end, server-side tests. We're using a testing framework called PHP Unit, and all of these PHP tests were probably written in the 2014-2015 era, so they've been hanging around a while. Once the tests are running, you'll start to see little dots going across the screen representing passing tests. These unit tests some of them are actual unit tests, others of them are more integration tests, which don't run it quite as quickly. So okay, great. The PHP tests all pass. So the next thing we'll do is we'll run the E2E tests. So make test E2E. These tests are all AngularJS protractor tests. So the testing framework is called Protractor. That's based upon another browser controller testing framework written in Jasmine and using this platform called Selenium WebDriver JS. It's a setup rig that's been around for a while. That's what Protractor decided to use. Protractor is the official testing framework for AngularJS. Of course, AngularJS is deprecated now, so this is all old tech. But Selenium is still alive and kicking for some people. Alright, so we're just about to get the test started. Jasmine has started, and now what it's doing is it's sending commands to a Selenium Docker container, also running locally on the dev machine. And as it runs those tests and sends commands to manipulate the browser, it will then report back the results, like whether or not it clicked on something or entered data in, and checks to see for the presence or absence of some thing based on a condition. So E2E tests are passing, we're all green, this is a great thing. We'll cover in another video how to actually debug E2E tests. So just for curiosity, what if we want to actually see these things running? I mean, this thing is running in my little WSL terminal here. You can't actually see the tests running in a browser. They're not running in my host browser. I don't even have that actually open at the moment. So how do I actually see these? Well, the Docker container that is running Selenium also comes with an actual browser. It comes with a VNC server, the debug version of the container does, and we can connect to that VNC server from my host and look and see what's going on inside. So this is kind of neat. I'll go ahead and fire up VNC Viewer here, and by default so our Docker Compose, well, our setup actually has this port already exposed, the default VNC port, which is 5900, I believe. So all I need to do is connect on localhost to VNC Viewer, using VNC Viewer, and then suddenly I've got a window into these running tests. And it's pretty cool. So I can see, it looks like Chrome running inside of a Docker container, and we can see the tests being run and controlled by the protractor test run. And if you want to grab a bowl of popcorn and watch all the tests run for the next 10 minutes, be my guest. But I'm not going to go there. So I can close this VNC window, not a problem at all. The tests continue to run. If I connect again, it'll just show me exactly what's going on there in real time. So the each tests take a long time to run, and I'm not going to spend the next 10 minutes of this video doing that. So I'm just going to Control C and then just exit out of that. That's not a problem. So I'll do a make clean just to kind of make sure everything is closed down. All the containers have stopped running, and then we'll go ahead and look at the source code. Great. Okay, let's jump on over to VS Code, and I'll take you through the various areas of the source code so you can get familiar with them. Alright, this is the root level of the repository Web Language Forge. We have the standard GitHub and VS Code folders. There's a few other things in here that are very familiar, probably Docker ignore, editor config, git attribute, git ignore, git modules. Then the package lock, readme, ts config, webpack config. So these are all standard stuff that you'll see in different repos. Nothing too esoteric here. We do have gulp as a dependency, and we're moving away from that. Hopefully by the time all of these videos are done, the gulp file will be no more, and we'll have moved our build tasks and infrastructure into npm scripts inside of package.json, but we're not quite there yet. So these upload, include, and exclude, these are artifacts of the current production deployment system, and so we're in the process of reworking our production deployment, so these things would not be necessary once we've got that new thing going. The karma conf file is for running unit tests, front-end AngularJS unit tests. And I'm not demoing that in this video because we're actually not running those currently, and that's on my to-do list. Okay, so we'll just go through I'm going to cover the least significant folders first and get those out of the way. So typings. This is just a place to put TypeScript definitions, type definition files. And they're hooked into through the wherever the TypeScript compiler settings are, which is probably in webpack config or package.json. Or ts config. Hello. Then probably the next insignificant thing is the README images. These are simply, they're just a couple of images that are linked to directly in the README. So if I jump on over to Web Language Forge and look at the README, you'll see there's a few images here like browser stack and Bugsnag. Well, those images are actually checked into our repo right here. The docs folder, hardly anything left in there, but there's a few, maybe a few artifacts from days gone by, some lift files that didn't feel right about deleting those. So same with semantic domains. So I'm not sure where we're going to move those, but docs is probably not the best place for those. Anyways, next up is deploy. Deploy contains all of our Ansible scripts that were used in previous generation before we were enlightened by Docker. So I'm excited to delete this folder once we have a proven deployment, production and QA deployment path, and we've extracted all of the knowledge out of Ansible and into our Docker images. So yeah, can't delete that one yet. So next up, probably scripts. Scripts are mostly PHP scripts, but there's probably some other stuff in here too. The idea was that this is a place to put sort of server-side or local scripts that are useful for certain tasks, but that should not be deployed like as part of the source code of the source code or the dist distribution deployment of the application. So these things shouldn't make it up to the production server. Specifically, things like factory reset, whose whole point is to completely erase the Mongo database. So dangerous. Yeah, don't want that around on a production machine. Okay. Yeah, so what's next? The Docker folder. Now this is where a lot of the development action has been going on for the past few months, for January, February, and March, and it's finally stabilizing. Really excited to see it at this point. We've got Docker images for a number of services, containers, and most of these are working as advertised now. Probably the main ones, files that you'll want to know about are Docker Compose and the make file, and then all of these images, all these folders in here, which contain a Docker file itself, are referenced inside the Docker Compose. I'm not going to go into that too much because my current viewership already knows about the Docker folder. There you go. Okay. Test folder. What's in here? So the test folder has, there's a common directory which has common things possibly used by both the app folder and the PHP folder. Can you guess what these two are? PHP is, you guessed it, PHP unit tests. So those are all filed in neatly under here. And app is probably the less appropriately named front-end tests, primarily E2E tests. Although I suppose that there's other front unit tests in here. Although, actually, I feel like this is just E2E tests. So if I was going to rename this, I would call it E2E. There you go. In my first video with the demo of the Language Forge UI, I actually used this 7-zip folder here, or 7-zip file. It's a zip archive called testlangproj.7z, so you'll want to be able to find that inside the test common folder. Yeah, just going into the PHP folder here a little bit. The configuration file, I believe, is this PHP unit file. Yeah. So this just kind of sets up PHP unit with some parameters or settings, and then basically the PHP unit goes up and grabs every PHP file inside of these folders and runs them. They're all they're all static functions inside of a class that extends test case, and so PHP unit will pick those up and then run them. Like this one. Test, communicate to user, no from address, exception, expects an exception, goes off, sets up the environment, populates the data, and then here it runs the actual method under test. And then this expect exception should receive the exception and pass the test. Taking a look at the E2E test under the app folder, this has got, so you're probably going to notice that there's this word hanging around in our code base called bellows. Bellows was sort of the name that we ascribe all of our shared components and shared code between LanguageForge and ScriptureForge. So the history going back is that LanguageForge and ScriptureForge were sister sites. They shared a common code base, and this repo actually was the shared repo. That's now no longer the case, and ScriptureForge has reinvented, rewritten itself in a modern web stack, Angular and C#, and so that's not really a relevant name anymore, but some of the shared components, we just didn't move them all into a LanguageForge folder, we kept them in bellows. So there you go. Things that you'll see labeled with bellows are like change password app, project settings, project lists, forgot passwords, sign up, user management. These things we shared across the two apps, so we didn't have to copy those between the two. Yeah, and then there's even, oh yeah, look at this, this is fun. Okay, so in the E2E testing world, you've got all of these spec files which describe your test. So I'll open up change password here. So this is the Jasmine syntax with the describe block and then the it blocks for each test. And it will, it references what we call page objects. Now, I don't know if that's like a technical term or what, but basically you define your page and its features in a separate file so that your test is very succinct. So this thing that says like, it refuses to allow form submission if the confirmed input does not match. So then the first thing it does is it kind of sets up the test, it types in a password with change password page.password.send keys, then sends more keys to the confirm password piece, and then it runs an expect and expects the submit button to not be enabled. And then it clears out, it needs to sort of clear those two things so that it can leave the page in the desired state for some future operation. Probably the next test, actually. Now, how does it know what password and confirm are on this page? Well, that page object is defined, it's pulled in through this import statement, and it's defined in this shared folder change password.page. So I can see that in here. And then these are these element by ID. This is the protractor syntax of grabbing different elements off of the page, and then it's just sort of defining that class here, which you can reference them. So there you go. So the details of the different pages are defined in page objects. These are theoretically shared across tests, so another test, maybe not even a bellows test, could access this change password page and do some actions. Okay. It probably, I'm just going through the tests because I started there, but it's probably, in hindsight, maybe not the best place to start since we haven't looked at source code first, but there you go. It should be said that the lexicon app, as it were, LanguageForge was originally designed to be sort of a clearinghouse of multiple apps, and we actually, instead of designing LanguageForge as entirely like a monolithic single page app, we actually parted it out into separate AngularJS apps. It turned out to be not a good design decision for a few reasons, but yeah, learning opportunity there. And so the Lexicon app, which you can see in the URL when you go to languageforge.org/app/lexicon, you can see this thing being accessed. That's sort of the core functionality of LanguageForge. The other apps like change password, user management, project management, it's really, really simple, like not that complex compared to what's in the lexicon. So the real bread and butter of LanguageForge is this lexicon app. It's a lexicon editor app that you can use to collaborate in the dictionary. So we've got a number of tests around lexicon. So here's the editor entry tests. This is a fairly large file. Can I tell how many lines there are? 605 lines or so. Yep. Comments, got a few tests around commenting. Not nearly as many, 147 lines. Settings, and then there's different spec files out here for different settings views. We certainly don't have complete test coverage, but I think we have a good amount. And then these page objects definitions are all in the shared folder. Probably should rename them to page objects. I don't know. Okay. When each of these tests are run, they're all based off of this protractor.conf.js file. So that might come into play at some point. And there's a bunch of test constants in this JSON file which are used by the tests, referenced by the tests. Excuse me, I'm gonna get a drink. Okay. All this talking has got my voice kind of just getting a little sore. Okay. Test constants JSON file, so there's a lot of stuff in here that the tests use and reference. I probably should note that there's this all specs folder with an after each spec.ts. This thing just, the function of this thing is really to catch, it's like an error, an exception catch mechanism that if there's various types of errors, okay, I should say that it catches errors and fails the test. It will also, let me see here. It also decides to ignore certain browser console errors. So we'd like to fail the test if there's a console error. That's very helpful. But there's certain console errors that we maybe don't want to, that are okay to ignore, and those are defined in this utilities is a message to ignore. Okay, some little interesting tidbit. And pretty much all of our tests call this this after each all specs thing. I'm trying to remember where this is actually called. Okay. I think it's just the fact that it's included by the protractor conf, and then these things, this special method called after each, just every test that gets run, this thing gets executed. So there you go. Okay, jumping over to the source code. Close all. No, how do I do this? Close all. Okay. Okay, are we excited? The source code for LanguageForge. We'll go ahead and cover these because there's a lot of folders in here, so I'm going to cover the folders that are the least important first, in my opinion. Let's see, or that the least important or just really easy to explain. So apt manifest, this is a folder with assets specifically for the PWA, that LanguageForge PWA requirements for LanguageForge. No, not that important necessarily. Small set of files. Assets. Assets are, it's not actually checked into the repo. If it is, it's an empty folder, and this is where the user uploads an assets like importing a lift file or a zip file or something that would get stored in here, and it would. I think even the E2E tests will, generate things in this folder. Essentially, it's ignored in the get ignore file, but things will show up in here as you exercise the application. Cache, very similar. It's a PHP caching layer for the application, the server-side portion of the application. The dist folder should be ignored by Git. You don't want to ever check that in, and it's similar to the assets folder. Should be empty in the repo, but as whenever you build the front end of the application with Webpack and whatnot, and also the SAS files compiled to CSS, that gets dumped into this dist folder and then used by the application. Okay, help. What is this folder? Self-explanatory. Not really. We had back a few years ago, one of the LSDev members who is a help documentation writer, and so he went through the LanguageForge application and wrote a series of help documentation, which was very helpful. Although it never really shipped. It kind of we got to a certain draft, but this thing is I don't believe that it's. Let me check that. Let's see if this thing is actually linked to. Okay. Oh. Please hold. Yeah, so I don't think that there is any direct link to the helps. So the idea, these were originally written as a robo-help. Robo-help is a help documentation piece of software. So it was created in robo-help, and then we checked it into the repo because we were going to release it as an official help thing, but it really only reached draft status, and then it kind of got dropped along with many other things as unfortunately with this project. So it's there. I don't know if we'll ever ship it. That would be okay, but certainly documentation for LanguageForge is lacking, and we may be able to leverage this somehow, but there it is. Okay, that was a big mouthful. The JS folder. Wow, this would be a wonderful folder to make it go away. These are some leftover dependencies of our application, and I'm not confident at the moment to delete it, but I think that someone could spend some time to see, are these things used? and if they're used, can we replace them with something more modern that we could npm install. But these are basically checked in JavaScript dependencies from before npm. Wow. Okay, JSON, language forge, lexicon, folder. These are JSON assets that are downloaded by the application and used in the application. There you go. Release notes. Release notes are exactly what you would expect. There's a markdown file that we check in and we can update, and that's linked to from the application. Sass. Okay, this is the main Sass file, SCSS, to control the styles for the language forge application. Service worker folder. This set, as far as I can tell, this goes. I'm a little bit confused. So I have to check to see if app manifest is even necessary or used by the service worker. I think it is, but the service worker is referenced in the I think the service worker is referenced in the app. Oh man. You know what? This app manifest may be the old style offline app HTML thingy. I'm not even sure. So it's possible that this may no longer be used. You need to investigate. Service worker is definitely used. However, let it be known that the Language Forge PWA gains you nothing other than a nice, frameless application running in the browser, and a splash screen or something like that, and an icon on your desktop. But it doesn't add any functionality. The service worker doesn't do anything. That would be awesome to improve. But at this point, I think it has a message that says you're offline or not. But there you go. Okay, we're getting close. I'm going to jump back up to the really big ones here in just a moment, but we're going to keep moving down the line. So app dependencies. This is a list of checked-in dependencies that also I'm actually not 100% sure how this works anymore, but I believe that they're either checked in or they are they're referenced specific. For some reason, they are not part of the Webpack bundle, but they're pulled in separately as script tags in the body of the application. So, for instance, font awesome, ng table, and international tel input. These things. If I go to Language Forge and go look at the source code, I should be able to find these things right here. Sure enough, script, intel input, there's the rangy stuff. Yeah, the ng table thing, not exactly sure. Oh, here's font awesome. Apparently Intel input is in there twice. That is disturbing. Okay, moving on. Obviously there needs to be some optimization here. So ideally, in my opinion, this file should not exist. It should be all pulled, all of these dependencies should be pulled in as npm dependencies and bundled with Webpack. That's a wonderful technical debt for someone to tackle. Okay, composer.json, composer lock. These are PHP dependency. Composer is a dependency management system. and it actually works really well. I've always liked Composer. I feel like it works way better than NPM as far as like speed and just works type of thing. But anyways, it's PHP, so you know, if you ever need to bump up the Composer dependencies, you'll do that here in the JSON file, and then you'll run like a Composer install, I think. Okay, the config.php and the config PHP for test and for live, these two are copies that have different live and test environment or test settings. They're checked in as well. But the config.php, this is the thing that actually runs with the application in whatever mode you're in. In days gone by, before Docker, the developer machine would right before running tests, it would swap out the for test config, it would override it as a environment setup piece, and then at the end of running tests, it would put the live config back in. This basically allows you to talk to a different database for your set of users and stuff, and not clobber whatever developer users and projects you've got set up in the application. So, but the config.php, I would say that for the bulk of the settings of the LanguageForge backend, they're in either config.php or directly in the index.php. One of those two. Config.php is going to have lots of just setting things from the environment, like database name, Mongo connection, whether to use minified JS. Here's a whole mess of secrets that will, if they're not already defined, then they get defined as sort of placeholder things, which are fine to be checked in because they don't actually contain any secrets. So there you go. This is the place where, for production, thinking here of a certain viewer who's working on a production environment right now, where they would put into either rewrite this config.php to pull environment variables, in which case you might say pull them from the environment, but if they don't exist in the environment, then define them like this as a sample secret, something like that. And then that would probably just work in the Docker production environment. Little tip there. I don't need to explain favicon. Index. There's probably very little in here that's worth explaining, but I have seen, there's been a few times when I needed to in the process of developing LanguageForge, there's some routing things that are in here, which hand off routes to a few different controllers, but where's the routing thingy? Ah, yeah. Routing. There you go. Spread, yeah, so there's a bunch of different routes and page controllers and stuff defined in here. Not a big deal. Here's a maintenance message that I've used a few times when taking down the site for migrations and whatnot. An offline message that shows up whenever you lose your connection. I think the service worker brokers this thing. Not sure how useful that is. We have a neat little delivery message that we can go on to the server and punch in a message into this JSON file, and then it will appear to everyone on their machine or on wherever they are on LanguageForge. It'll show up in a little message bubble, so we can say LanguageForge will be unavailable for 5 hours next week or something like that, so we can deliver that to users. That's very handy. Version. Version.php actually is a version that shows up on the website, and it gets stamped at build time. Like currently on TeamCity, TeamCity will stamp this with the actual version number, and so this would be another sort of environment thing that would be easy to replace. Or some best practice way of stamping a version in production code. Okay, I think I've gone through all the low-hanging fruit. Let's go ahead and take a look at. Okay, I'll just summarize here. So Angular app, this has pretty much all of the front-end AngularJS code. Simple enough. The PHP code, unfortunately, is spread between the API folder and the site folder. There's no actual rhyme or reason why these things are separate now. We initially used a PHP framework called CodeIgniter, which we then replaced with another PHP micro framework called Silex. Silex is now abandoned as a project. It's been replaced by Symfony. We're still using the old Silex abandoned framework, which is a huge technical debt item, but there you go. And this is how Silex organized things. Really, if I were to reorganize these things, I would put a controller, handler, model, OAuth, provider. I'd put all of that stuff over here in the API, because it's pretty much just PHP code that it is hooked together and organized together. And then the views folder under site is something sort of special. This is where we have the HTML templates, which then render the actual page that gets delivered. Now, in Language Forge, we've got like a templating system. There's a templating language here called Twig. I think Twig is kind of like a PHP special type of technology, but I think it's independent of PHP, but a lot of PHP projects use it. Anyway, you've got Twig templates, which sort of inherit or build upon each other. And this theme thing here with the default has a number of, it actually just has some images. There's images which are specific to Language Forge. Remember, and don't judge, all of this used to be like nicely laid out for multiple themes and skins for multiple websites, both Scripture Forge and Language Forge. At one time, we had several Scripture Forge websites that were skinned slightly differently. Kind of cool for different use cases. Some used in sensitive areas. That's no longer the case at the moment, but. And then there's some SAS files in here. So just think of the views folder as something kind of set apart from these other site folders in here. I would say that the majority of the backend code, backend API, PHP API code is in the API folder under library, model, or service. Again, naming things is hard, and I can't actually tell you what the difference between these three things are anymore. It's just, well, as it turns out, service is just basically one file. Okay. Okay, what should we do first? Let's just go through the PHP code to talk through it. So we talked about views. Controller. Okay. This is not how you would build an API today. but this is what happened. So using this PHP micro framework, it had certain sort of controllers which defined various functions in basically different pages of the website. Now, Language Forge was actually written as an online application, so every sort of getting to a new page or application would be a page refresh. So it wasn't written as a single page app, even though we kind of did this hybrid thing. So we have the concept of pages, which is the page controller. And it looks like this guy pretty much just handles the front brochure HTML5 homepage and maybe one or two other things. I'm thinking maybe the release notes, something like that. So not a lot of functionality from this guy. The script controller handles running scripts on the from the UI. You can actually run certain scripts that exist. And there's a nice little thing that helps you run those, like enumerates the ones that you can run. The upload controller, this actually handles uploading files to the server. We handle uploading of images and audio files and zip files. Validate controller, I think this handles the email validation token handling. Download, self-explanatory, download a file of some sort. I'll skip base for a minute. Auth. Auth is it's a mostly set up originally from the Silex auth controller, but we sort of grew into it and added more and more stuff, but it handles the authorization related functions like logging in, resetting passwords, OAuth. Yeah, pretty much. The login page is in here. The controller for the login page is in here. So unfortunately, since we don't have a single page app, there's some functions that are outside of the Angular app world, and those routes are actually in PHP. I apologize. Yeah. App.php extends base, and this is a largest file that sets up all sorts of variables that are needed by the that gets sent down as a payload, a JSON sort of payload down when the page loads, and are available to the client application. And it has various like logic to switch between various things. Oh, that's, yeah, good. A lot of these things are actually not strictly necessary. If we had a nice separation but clear API boundary, then a lot of this stuff would just sort of go away. The API controller, just as far as I can tell, is just a wrapper around the SF service, which you find over here under API service and SF. Now SF.php, it was originally named for Scripture Forge. That was the first one we wrote. Language Forge came along a year later, but SF is a little Easter egg that's left in there, and it's actually a really important file. It defines all of the methods of the API, okay? So your API method is defined in here. Oh, by the way, surprise, we don't use REST. We're using JSON RPC. So that's another twist in the application architecture that's you're probably not used to. JSON RPC, I have no problems with it. I think it fit well, but it's not like the standard thing that everyone's familiar with. basically JSON RPC is like you have a method name, and then a list of parameters. It's RPC at its core. You're calling some method remotely and passing the parameters, and then you get back the return value or the response. Yeah, so that's what this thing does. This just defines them, and most of these API method definitions are just wrappers for PHP static functions. So we have these classes which define various commands or operations, and then they get passed in. What's common, what you'll see that's common in these methods is that some sort of internal state, some sort of application state will get passed into these static methods that is not part of the parameter that's passed in through the API. So for instance, you've seen it all over here. The project ID. As it turns out, and this is a bad architecture idea in my opinion. We went back and forth. I went back and forth about this a number of times. Do we keep the user's project ID as a state in the application, or do we let the API request it every time? What you see here is that the project ID is in fact stateful, and the server knows what project you have requested, and it passes it in through these into these methods, these commands. They're not passed in as a parameter to the API method, the JSON RPC method itself. There you go. Okay, I've jumped up into the API folder when I was still down in the controller folder. I skipped over base. Base just sets up a ton of variables having to do with things that ideally would be shared between the API, app, auth, and page, and maybe other controllers. So some controllers inherit from base, some don't. I'll tell you right now, app controller definitely does. There you go, app extends base. Auth extends app. Page extends base. So base is kind of so we got classic object-oriented inheritance here. Not sure how well we did with that, but there you go. This is like a run through of code, but it's also a critique of code. Okay, so there's going to be a whole mess of API classes and PHP classes under library, language forge, shared. Oh wow, that should actually be cleaned up. Looks like I've got some more cleanup to do. But the folder structure in here, man, it really just kind of, it's like a garden that no one weeded, because it just said it grew out of boundaries here. But some of these folders, they don't make sense anymore. Like the Palazzo folder. Somehow, I think the script shared, so library shared script, these folders, these things in here, like the migration and utility scripts, these things are accessible via in the UI via the script controller. Actually, this is kind of a good example. I think if I log in, yeah, that's the actual site. Okay, let me bring up the site here. not going to go into the actual LanguageForge.org site. Yeah, whenever you're a developer, man, you got to make sure you're on the thing that you think you're on. So if I log in as the admin user and then go to site administration, oh, no, you're right. No. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now I'm trying to figure out how this actually works, my memory. Get script. This should work. Okay. Maybe it needs a trailing slash. Nope. Okay. Dang. That was supposed to work. But anyway, my example failed. I'm sure that I could get it to work with a little bit more time. All that to say, the script controller here, which enumerates things in the API library shared script folder, you can actually run things. This thing will enumerate, like get you all of the ones that are there and create a list of them and display them in a page, which would be defined yeah, I'm not exactly sure where that would be defined, but the things you could run would be located in these script PHP files here. Okay, bad example. Okay, a little note about the website class and these supporting the website instances, files. These things used to be really important when we had multiple websites, but now we just have LanguageForge and only LanguageForge. And so this is technical debt that should be removed at some future point if we decide to go that far. LanguageForge is working just fine the way it is, but there is this website class that gets passed around in all different places. That's no longer strictly necessary. It's kind of like representing the LanguageForge website, a few features about it, like its name and whether or not, and what applications can be run in it and that sort of thing. But it's actually not necessary anymore. Yeah, so it's a bit of a big refactor to remove all references to that, so that's why it's still hanging around. LanguageForge lexicon, so there's a lot of different server-side models here that model these things, like a lexical sense has, you know, a bunch of different fields and they're defined in PHP, and then there's some helper functions around senses, things for committing, you know, for doing activity in LanguageForge. So lots of time in these different, lots of time spent writing these different back-end pieces. But at the end of the day, you know, this is the code works, and there's, what do we got? Command folders are everything that's in commands is typically static classes with static methods that, or classes with static methods that you just run something without state necessarily, or you have to pass in the state. These ones down here, these Lex models, these are real bona fide classes that get instantiated, with the new operator and that sort of thing. Create a new class, or instantiate a new class. Sorry. There's also another acronym that we've used, and you'll see it in the code base, and that's called DTO. So that stands for Data Transfer Object. Somebody somewhere got us onto that, and we've hung on to that acronym. But it's basically it's a composition class, so it composes the data for the view, and it will pull together multiple classes or multiple commands, get the data in what the view expects, and then send it down the wire to the client, and then the client makes use of that data. That's the way it's working. We're in lexicon command, and then there's config. Config has all sorts of models around that giant config view for dictionary configuration. The project model is something that LF project model, obviously a very small class here that extends project model. I can click through the project model. This is a much bigger beast here with a lot of different properties and methods hanging off of it. The project model is, as you expect, it's models a project and how users and other attributes are related to that. We settled on a persistence mechanism. We abstracted away the database so that we didn't write any code that was actually running Mongo queries. So that was kind of cool. Really nice developer experience, in my opinion. So any class that extended this thing here, this extends mapper model, for instance, any class that extends mapper model will automatically persist itself in the database based upon some certain setup things. Like if I go to the constructor here, here it is, activity model Mongo mapper connect database name and ID. This is super simple. All you need is a single line here, and then this class knows how to persist itself in Mongo. Read it, write it, CRUD operation, that sort of thing. And it comes with a view. So all we had to do is write this mapper class, and then everything else can kind of come along for the ride. Now there's exceptions to that. We do have some direct Mongo queries to optimize a few certain things, but the majority of our code is actually written database agnostic with this mapper model. It was fun to use. I think you're seeing in here like a bunch of stuff that's shared, like activity, comment model, input system. I don't know if all of this would have actually been shared. Sometimes we would put something in a shared folder thinking, oh, maybe this could be shared, but it never was with ScriptureForge. So, like I said, the garden kind of got overgrown, and hopefully, you won't have to like go hunting for something. You can just search for it and find it. I've spent a ton of time on the PHP code. There's a lot more that I could talk about there, but I'm not going to because I'm already like over an hour into my talk. Okay, here we go with the Angular app folder and related source code. As I mentioned probably half an hour or more ago, there's this bellows folder, which you see, and this is essentially shared functionality between the original ScriptureForge and LanguageForge, like change password, project management, user management, stuff like that. So you'll see those here under apps, and here's a nice, neat list of them. These apps. Each one of these folders represents a AngularJS single-page application, and they are accessed on the URL with /app/projects or /app/change password. Of course, the exception is public. Public is a special folder where that contains public apps, or public routes rather. So /app/sign up or /reset password or forgot password, or those things you can access without needing to be logged in. This was a way for us to manage routes that we separated the ones that needed to be authenticated and the ones that didn't need to. There you go. Okay, so that's Bellows. Sorry. That's the app folder under Bellows. Then there's core, which I think has a bunch of shared TypeScript services and components and things like that. Yeah, mostly services and components. Yeah. Off the top of my head, I can't actually articulate the difference between core and shared, but my feeling is that they're both shared, which they were both shared between the two things, but now they're a different kind of sharing, I guess. It probably could just be merged, these two folders together. I don't know. I actually was not the person who converted all of this to TypeScript, and so some of the organization is beyond my understanding. I think it's actually really well organized, better than many other parts, but there you go. LanguageForge folder as a sibling of Bellows folder, and this is going to be the lexicon specific stuff. So you see the lexicon app here, and then subfolders in there. The lexicon app component, very small file, just defines the AngularJS UI view thing. Component with its dependencies, setup, and a few things like hooking up the services. Module, this is just boilerplate AngularJS. Yep, this is a twig file, I think, lexicon.html, with a SCSS file sitting next to it. But all of so like the lexicon editor actually happens inside of, it's all kind of neatly packaged in here with the commenting part of it in this folder. All the field specific components are all in here. So I tried to like kind of have subfolders that make sense and kind of keep things from spreading out too wide. New project is a folder specific to the new project wizard. So when you're over here at get there. When you click on the starter join, now I'm in the new project wizard, and I can see that with the app lexicon new project. So this route specific to this folder under lexicon new project, and then this thing with the new lexicon new project HTML and the module and the components all get kind of pulled together. And there's a few views here inside this project wizard, like send receive, non-send receive. There you go. Settings. This is all related to dictionary settings, specifically configuration. That specifically, I'll go back to my projects. Oh yes, that's not, I don't have a project there. I can do this. I'll just do it. Let's just fire up a new project here real quick. Test. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we got this dictionary. So all that settings and configuration, that's basically that's this view, configuration. This is a monster view, by the way. Yeah, very complex. And so that would be configuration. Let me get back there. So that's all this stuff, configuration in here. Okay, import and project settings. That would be, here's import, here's project settings. Project settings, pretty basic. Import, just like drag a little lift file here or a zip folder. And then sync is, oh yeah, not listed because it's not a send and receive project. Send and receive projects have another little sync component. Apparently there's, oh, shared, you got the share with others thing. That's this guy. I'm the only guy who has access to this one right now. That's the settings folder and the shared folder. Woo. Yeah, I should, all these different field definitions and components, these are things that are the pieces that render like these, the word, all these different fields here. These are our different types of fields to be rendered. Wow, I feel like I've pretty much gone through most of it. So LD project is a new addition to the LanguageForge code base, and that's what one of our other developers has been working on to integrate Language Depot more tightly with LanguageForge. And yeah, it's been a long road. It's coming along. So that's a separate. It's been implemented as a separate app in addition to Lexicon. I can barely talk anymore, so yeah, I'm gonna stop there. Thanks for watching. I will be producing more videos in the future when I have more energy and more voice and probably lots more coffee. So we'll see you next time. Bye.